Hello and welcome to another remote edition of Currently in Quincy. I'm Joe Catalano, and on today's program, we chat with South Shore Chamber of Commerce President Peter Foreman about the state's reopening plan during the coronavirus pandemic. First, though, we'll check the news for you. Currently in Quincy, there are 1,120 cases of coronavirus. There have been 109 deaths, and 606 people have recovered from the virus. There are now over 90,000 cases statewide. The Quincy City Council will begin reviewing Mayor Thomas Koch's proposed $340 million budget for the next fiscal year that begins on July 1st. Koch presented the proposed spending plan to the City Council during a remote meeting this past Monday night. On Tuesday, the mayor took to the podium in the Great Hall at Quincy City Hall and explained why he decided to allow construction projects to continue in Quincy throughout the COVID-19 emergency.
General economy of Quincy, we are one of the largest cities in the Commonwealth. And after the federal census is done, we're probably going to be the sixth or seventh largest community by population in Massachusetts. And so we are an economic engine as one of the largest cities. We employ more than 2,300 full-time employees, 1,300 part-time employees. We're the home of a lot of corporate businesses here in Quincy, and we have a very thriving economy. Now, during this process, some communities chose to shut down construction completely. We chose not to do that. Now, let me tell you why. Two major projects, for example, is going on is the O'Connell Building, Quincy Center, the 15-story residential, and the project down at the North Quincy T-Station, which is Bozzuto Atlantic Development, being constructed by Callahan. There's tens of millions of dollars involved in these projects. If those projects came to a halt and weeks go by, who knows what would occur? Would the bank call the loan? Would there be bankruptcies? How long would that site sit? I can recall when in the late 80s we hit the development bust. Some may remember bowling at the Wonder Bowl. Today it's now River Bay, a beautiful building for seniors. That sat just in the steel frame for 2 years after that process. So we didn't want to experience that again, number one. Number two is, why overreact? Let's keep jobs moving. Let's keep people paid so they can feed their families and take care of their business.
Koch said his goal with the proposed new budget is for no property tax increase, although he says a small increase may be needed in the fall when the city has a better idea of what it will be receiving for state aid. He said the budget proposal is about $10 million less than it would have been had there been no pandemic. Construction is underway on some new seawalls along Howes Neck and Adams Shore and Marymount to protect Quincy's coastline from future flooding. Earlier this week, Congressman Stephen Lynch joined Mayor Thomas Koch and Ward 1 Councilor Dave McCarthy in reviewing that project that's beginning in the area known as the Willows.
These are the projects, a lot of it is equipment, not a lot of people out there, but a lot of equipment operators, Local 4. They can come back and they can work safely and get this work done. It'll help open up the economy.
Absolutely. In fact, I've been in a little disagreement with some of my colleagues at the mayor level, and we never stopped construction on housing. We never stopped on our road construction for those reasons. Lee Kennedy and Callahan and all, they instituted the guidelines, they're watching the sites, making sure everyone's doing everything right, and they haven't had any issues. So, we have to keep the economy going. And by the way, what they're building is housing. We need the housing.
Right.
So.
No, that's very true.
So I appreciate that, and that's a real key message. I know that everyone's walking the line about how we reopen, what do we open up, what's the right timetables. If it's too fast, do we go backwards? If it's not fast enough, does the economy completely tank? So there is that balance we're trying to all strike. I know there's no perfect answer.
The project will raise the seawall 2 feet higher from the Willows to Chickatobit, all along with installing some new drainage systems and a new pumping station at Post Island Road. The federal government provided $3 million, which was matched by state and city funds. Quincy Mayor Thomas Koch says he is urging the Department of Conservation and Recreation to reopen Wollaston Beach and the Blue Hills Reservation for walkers. The mayor says with the parking lots at both areas closed, motorists are parking in local neighborhoods, and that's creating a safety concern and a nuisance for residents. The mayor says he feels that the recreational areas can be opened if proper social distancing guidelines are followed. The DCR says the parking lots at both Wollaston and Nantasket beaches and Hull will remain closed through this Memorial Day weekend. A homeless man has been charged with robbing a Quincy bank back in March. 56-year-old Peter Stewart was arrested this past Tuesday, charged with holding up the South Shore Savings Bank on Quincy Avenue on the morning of March 11th. Police say Stewart demanded cash from a teller, then fled on foot with some money. Stewart was arrested on a warrant this past Tuesday after police received tips from witnesses and the public. He gives his address as Father Bill's homeless shelter in Quincy. Stewart was arraigned remotely on a charge of unarmed robbery, was ordered held on $2,000 bail. There will be a much different Memorial Day observance in Quincy this year due to the pandemic. There will be no parade, only a small 15-minute ceremony at Mount Wollaston Cemetery on Monday. Mayor Thomas Koch and Veteran Services Director George Nicholson will offer brief remarks. There will be no guest speaker and no collation after the event. The public is urged to stay away. However, residents are urged to fly the American flag. Veterans Services will be decorating the graves of 7,500 veterans buried at Quincy City cemeteries with the American flags prior to Monday. And the names of all Quincy veterans who have died over the past year will be read aloud. There's a food drive taking place tomorrow at the Central Middle School on Hancock Street in Quincy. The Norfolk Labor Council and the United Way will be collecting donations of non-perishable food tomorrow from 9 to noon to be distributed to local food pantries. Donors are urged to observe social distancing and wear face masks if they plan to make a donation. And the American Red Cross reminding you they're holding a community blood drive on Tuesday, 1 to 7 p.m. at the Sons of Italy Hall on Quarry Street. You can visit redcrossblood.org or call 1-800-RED-CROSS to schedule an appointment and for more information. Coming up, Peter Foreman of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce on how the pandemic will impact local businesses. That is next.
Mental health care is critical, and even more so now as we all face the isolation and anxiety of the coronavirus pandemic. Please join Interfaith Social Services in its annual Stop the Stigma 5K, happening virtually May 24th and 25th. Run or walk to erase stigmas surrounding mental illness and addiction, and to support our family, friends, and neighbors affected by these issues. All proceeds from this event benefit Interfaith's New Directions Counseling Center. Visit stopthestigma5k.org to sign up.
Have questions about the coronavirus?
I'm here to share some simple steps you can take to help protect yourself and others.
Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Wash your hands often with soap and water for 20+ seconds.
Cover your cough or sneeze with a tissue.
Clean and disinfect surfaces and objects. Wash hands after touching commonly used items.
Together, we can help slow the spread.
There will be parties again soon, and family gatherings. There will be parades, and sporting events, and concerts. To help our communities when they come back together, respond to the 2020 census now. Spend a few minutes online today to impact the next 10 years of healthcare, infrastructure, and education. Go to 2020census.gov and respond today to make America's tomorrow brighter. It's time to shape our future.
Pleased to be able to chat virtually with the president of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. Peter Foreman is joining us remotely. Peter, good to see you and chat with you. Thanks so much for taking some time to talk with us.
Glad to. Good to see you again, Joe.
I was hoping we could do this in person, but this will have to suffice for the time being. But hopefully in the future, not too distant future, we can do that. But I thought it'd be a very timely topic, certainly right now, to talk about the state of business here on the South Shore, the forward-looking progress that we're starting now with the phased-in reopening, and just overall what the Chamber is seeing in the business climate. Good place to start, I guess, would be, what is the South Shore Chamber of Commerce?
Sure. Well, we have history going back about 120 years, starting as a Quincy Board of Trade back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, became the Quincy Chamber, then grew into the South Shore Chamber of Commerce, and gave up the name Quincy Chamber, and now there is a local business group, the Quincy Chamber. So we share the territory. Tim Cahill is president of the Quincy Chamber, but we grew out of that heritage, and our regional chamber. And the idea is that economies really are coordinated at several different levels. You need a strong local community, strong local business voice, but town municipal economies don't run in isolation, so you need a strong region. And that was the really the movement about 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, where the local chamber leadership became a regional chamber voice. So we do a lot around economic development for the entire region, political advocacy, and then of course member services, as all chambers and membership organizations do. And we're looking mostly at that southern suburban market between Randolph, Milton, Quincy, down to Cape Cod Canal. And that's kind of the economic environment that most of our businesses are working in. Certainly dependent on what happens in Boston, but distinct from Boston. We have our own concerns around infrastructure and economic development for this area.
How many members right now in the South Shore Chamber, Peter?
About 1,200 members. And they're not all businesses located on the South Shore. We have businesses from Boston or Cape Cod that want to be active in this economic market down here, and they're members as well. But we're the largest business organization in this region. And it's funny, we all grew up on the South Shore, and everyone asks, where is it? It's amazing. There is no political jurisdiction, but it's about 25 communities is what we consider the footprint. It's generally the Route 3 corridor. Not surprisingly, economies move along infrastructure and transportation networks, but it's essentially the Route 3 corridor and the Old Colony Rail line.
Sure, we're most familiar here in Quincy with the old mansion on Miller Style Road that was your
absolutely.
Yeah, you're down in Rockland now, is that right?
We're down in Rockland for a long time. We were at Miller Style, the shortest street in Quincy, but we were there. Great old building. Did not really suit the purpose and the needs. Needed a lot of work, and the new owners did that. It's a beautiful building now. The exterior was always beautiful. The inside is really nice. We could not have done that. But as the mission grew and the region grew, Rockland turns out to be the center of our geographic territory.
And do you have members to say that are both members of the South Shore Chamber and Quincy Chamber, for that matter?
No, absolutely. Because a lot of businesses understand you have local needs and then you have regional needs. So you'll have members who are active in many organizations. And then we actually help manage 6 or 7 local chambers of commerce and affiliations. Because we think as strong as we are with our regional perspective, you need good local leadership in individual communities. And Massachusetts is very parochial, cut up by over 350 individual communities. But that's where a lot of economic work gets done too, because you've got to go through these local boards to open a business or keep it running.
Sure. So what is kind of your overall mission at the Chamber, if you will?
It is beyond the member services, and that can vary depending on the type of business. But our larger mission we see is regional economic development, making the South Shore competitive so that people have better career job opportunities and business opportunities on the South Shore, not necessarily have to do the trade-in of quality of life for moving outside the city, but then getting long commutes to get the kind of jobs and businesses you need. But it's to create stronger communities through economic growth and create more economic activity here. That gets us into the political advocacy realm, trying to speak up for the region, dealing with state and federal officials quite a bit. And then we will be dealing with local officials and often do that with the local chambers and through our local affiliates.
And I'm assuming, given the current crisis with the pandemic, that mission has taken on a new meaning and a new role. What is kind of the current business climate in this state of emergency that we're in?
The economy has been knocked on its heels temporarily. I don't think this is a 10-year climb back. Certainly, small businesses have been hit hard, and employees have been hit hard. The concern is getting back into operation. Not necessarily normal, because economies change, and this accelerated change in a lot of industries, which will continue for a few years as that kind of shakes out and businesses reinvent themselves. But right now, a lot of confusion. We've never gone through something like this. So the idea of reopening and how you start it up is a pretty complicated process. And most businesses are trying to figure out what they have to do to reopen and how they reopen. And there are really three areas that are driving this for businesses. One is, what is the government saying? What do we have to do to reopen? But then they have to figure out in their own business plan how much do they reopen and how quickly can they reopen. And that comes down to, what do they have for employees who are able to come back to work? And what are their concerns, health concerns primarily? And then what about their clients? Particularly if you're in retail, what do the customers think about coming back in to stores? Now, that's for physical presence. Most businesses have actually continued during this in one capacity or another. Certainly with different working styles than we've all done before, but businesses have, many businesses have continued. So it's how do you change with this, knowing that a lot of customers might be reluctant coming into a crowded situation? How do you deal with employees who may have family issues and need to adjust hours? So most businesses are struggling with that. When will the government legally allow them to operate, and under what conditions? How do they organize and structure their work so that they're able to keep up with customer demand, but also have adequate resources and not essentially have more resources than they need? So they, if it's going to be slow, if it's a business that has a lot of people coming into it, but they think that foot traffic is going to be slower, they have to gauge how many people do they bring back at one time and what are those new hours. So that kind of business decision is taking place with most business owners. In typical office building situations, there's a great deal of concern about how do employees get to work. And this is going to be a huge challenge, mostly for Boston businesses and large corporate towers. How do employees get there? Because mass transit is a safety concern at this point. And state officials and the public are trying to figure this out now. So I think you're going to see that even with the governor's reopening, you're going to see most businesses phase in that reopening. They're still going to have a lot of employees who are working remotely, working different shifts and different hours to accommodate travel and daycare, and then try to figure out where the client demand is.
How do you feel about the governor's plan? Is it aggressive enough? Is it too aggressive? In terms of pace of opening in the 4 phases, how do you feel about it?
None of us have gone through this, so I don't think you can say it's too aggressive or not aggressive enough. I think it's deliberate, it's thoughtful, there's a rationale to it. They basically are working off a grid trying to match business sectors that have high economic value and low health risk, and gradually move out to businesses that right now opening up might appear as too risky for public health, and in some cases may not have real urgency to the economy. So they're trying to match up what's necessary to open up the economy, which is different than what our members and individual business owner has to think about and what the government has to think about on how you reopen this economy. Perfect example of that really is daycare. So much of the thinking that business owners have to think about with employees is, do the employees have access to daycare for their kids? Our chamber is a great example. We're a small staff. We only have 8 employees. Several have young children. Even though we're allowed to reopen, a good portion of our staff is going to continue to work remotely because daycare isn't open for them. So we have to be sensitive to that.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of companies will be reassessing how they do business and where they do business in the future?
Every company, if it's going to be successful, is doing a lot of strategic thinking at some level.
Right.
They're either thinking through how do they continue operating remotely or with staff that's going to be working remotely, clients that may be working more remotely now and not wanting face-to-face activity. They're working through those mechanics. In most businesses, that's where they've been spending most of their time. How do they keep liquid? How do they have the financial resources to get through this so that they can reopen? But as we get deeper into it, further along, businesses then start to think through beyond the shutdown, how do they get through the end of the year because of their financials? And then most are thinking at least 18 months out. How does this change the business they're in and the businesses or people they serve? And what does that mean for how they change their business model and strategic planning? And there will be a lot of that taking place over the next 18 months. So even as the economy gets rolling again, I think you're going to see most business leaders thinking through, and business owners thinking through, what's the longer term strategic plan because the economy changed.
Do you think some businesses will not be able to rebound from this, Peter?
There's no question. Economies, businesses are always evolving. Economies are evolving. That just like life, it means some are going to go away, new ones are going to be born, and that's true with businesses. So when I look at what's going on here, sad to say, there are a lot of businesses that will go out of business sooner than normal because of this pandemic. But those business owners aren't going to disappear, and those employees aren't going to disappear. And what we see a lot of on the South Shore is, even if that business disappears, that entrepreneur, business owner won't. they're likely to reappear with a new business. And in some ways, there are some reasons to be optimistic for the long term with this. We've got great entrepreneurial spirit on the South Shore. We've got a lot of highly skilled professionals who have opened up their own businesses. They may reinvent themselves. They may start up new businesses. We're seeing some acceleration of changing businesses to begin with going into this. This will accelerate that change, and creative people will adjust, and they'll come back stronger with some pain. There will be pain, there'll be losses, but ultimately I think we have the opportunity to come back a little stronger. Real estate's a great example, and a way to look at what could be happening here, and some of the things you couldn't just trigger on your own. We all know what's been happening to retail, for example. Retail businesses have been suffering for a long time. First because of big box stores and malls, right, and then because of online shopping. That changes the equation. Well, people are still going to shop. They'll buy things. They're going to buy them differently. So how does it affect us? Well, it affects a lot of retail store owners, first of all. Then it affects those building owners who own the space that retail stores are renting. So you have to think through what happens now to our downtowns or village centers, right, if the first floor retail starts to disappear. You don't want those blank spaces. Do we start thinking differently if you're a developer or a building owner that, maybe instead of bookstores, there are more coffee shops or law office professional services? Maybe there are more personal service businesses that go in than the typical merchandise retail. And how would that work out? In the suburbs, there may be some opportunity for the South Shore. I think large employers, large office space owners in Boston or in any city will probably they are rethinking, what does their office look like? Are they going to have the new design of what was the new design of open floor space, everyone sitting close to one another? Those rules just changed. Right. So a lot of companies are now going to be redesigning their office space. And then if you're a large employer in Boston, you have to think about the commuting time. Yeah. Those rules might have just changed. Certainly they've changed for the next 6 to 12 months. So will those companies start to think, instead of bringing everyone into Boston, maybe what we need to do is think about more sites and smaller sites out in the suburbs, including the South Shore. So that creates an opportunity for some of our developers and building owners to maybe attract more pieces of Boston companies to have office space down here to be more accessible to their employees who live down here. So if you follow some of this through, you could see that there will be some turnover on the South Shore, but there may be new opportunity, more demand for office space, which will help. That could attract more companies. And that means for a lot of our residents, there are more good job opportunities closer to home than maybe a commute into a congested city.
Okay. So I like the silver lining approach.
We're thinking through some of these dynamics.
Yeah.
As most community leaders and business leaders are doing, trying to figure out, what are the consequences as one thing changes? What are the consequences for the next domino, and what are the upsides?
Are there things that you think that state and local governments can or should be doing to help small businesses at this point?
They're working. I think there's a new appreciation for business in a lot of communities. There's been a pretty interesting national awareness coming out of this, that there is a stronger connection between employees and business, particularly small business. There was a big rush, obviously, to take care of all the employees, all the people who were losing jobs or closed down because of the inactivity with the shutdown. And there was a big rush, take care of those people. They lost jobs essentially because they were locked out of them.
Right.
So a big, unprecedented national movement supported by the business community of extra unemployment insurance, extra relief to individuals. But likewise, there was an awareness of we want people to have jobs to come back to. We better start thinking about small business. I think that's happening at the local level. Municipalities have taken a hard hit through this. They're losing a lot of tax revenue, which will affect services. They're thinking through how do we help our businesses in that tax base. So what can they do? They'll be able to help a lot as we get into reopening around permitting, approval process, local regulations. And we'll see some of that pretty early on as businesses start to reopen to public access. We'll have to see how closely some municipalities work with those businesses to try to help with guidance on safety without becoming so restrictive that they force a business to close down. We'll see how flexible they are on reuse in some real estate spaces. An example of that again is retail. There are areas that are zoned for retail. You'll get some local officials who say retail means merchandise. It doesn't necessarily mean a professional service like a health club or a spa or a beauty salon or something like that. Well, we would view that as retail.
Okay.
Some people might say, no, retail means you are selling a product for someone to walk out the door with. And there would be some communities that say, we're not going to allow that retail space to be used for a personal service business. That's where you need local flexibility with permitting and maybe zoning. I'm hoping there'll be more accommodation for that kind of flexibility.
I think probably you'll agree one of the hardest hit industries through this has been the restaurant industry. It's enough business without a pandemic. What would you be kind of your advice to restaurants to get through this?
It's been brutal. I would have no real advice to give them because they've been living through a terrible period. Some are trying to adjust. Mm-hmm. They're learning as an industry. They're going to teach us how to adjust and re-enter this. So we've seen what a lot of them have done. They've gone through the curbside and the takeout, but the whole model has changed. A lot of restaurants, again, depending on what kind of restaurant, what kind of food you're serving. Mm-hmm. A lot of restaurants operate on thin margins. So it's not enough to say they can open with spacing that allows half the restaurant to be full. They might as well not open at all in many cases. A lot of them make their money not just off the food, but off the liquor. So curbside food alone doesn't necessarily do it. But the food industry is going to be, I think, one of the more interesting business sectors to evolve. And I don't know how they're going to do that. I do know almost by definition of what they're into. They're some of the most creative people around.
And not afraid to take risks, right?
They're not afraid to take risks. Yeah. They really are creative entrepreneurs, not just great chefs, but they're great entrepreneurs. They're going to experiment. They're going to change. Some will succeed. Some will be more successful than they were. Some will fail and have to come back and reinvent themselves. The good news for them is everybody has to eat. Everybody wants to eat. They don't want to be cooking all the time. They want to go out. So there is going to be pent-up demand for that. But they're going to have to think individually based on sort of what their niche in products are, how they adjust. Mm-hmm. Not all restaurants and food are the same.
Right.
Some food works pretty well with curbside pickup. Some restaurant experiences don't work well at all with that. So they're going to have to figure out another model, or they're just going to have to go out of business because they have overhead even if they're not open. And they'll probably end up having to close and then reopen under a different name, different model, when there's more activity. And there's not much you can do to give them advice. So that's part of the cycle. You help them through individually as they try to reopen. And we'll be seeing a lot of that. So some of our work changes. I think we're going to focus and be promoting more work at the Chamber's end on how to help new businesses start up. Because I think there will be a fair amount of new business startups in the next 18 months.
Okay. Are there things that you think businesses can learn from European countries who've already, gone through the pandemic or are starting to come out on the other side, and things that could be modeled after them?
I think what businesses can really learn from, not necessarily another country, but learn from each other. Mm-hmm. So we've been pulling back a little bit on posting the how-to manuals and the how-to guidance on reopening, because what we're hearing from our members and finding is that every business has a somewhat unique situation, and it doesn't lend itself to say, here's the book for your business industry. What is proving to be more helpful is business owners being able to get on a Zoom chat or in a room with other business owners to talk through what their problem is. And sometimes it's not an issue about how do you deal with what is the COVID answer to this. It's more of what is the business solution to this problem. And what we have found in some of our discussions with people is there may be a little piece of a public health issue that they've got to address, but really what they're talking through is, how do I deal with my landlord? How do I deal with my banker? That has nothing to do with healthcare.
Right.
That's a straightforward business discussion. And talking that through turns out to be more helpful than trying to figure out what Italy or Spain are trying to do over the public health issues.
Yeah, fair enough.
So the next couple of months, we're doing a weekly town meeting forum with our members every Thursday, just to give them updates, because the guidelines are changing every few days.
Right, yeah.
From the government. Give them updates on the latest information that we're hearing, and then talk through what is the problem they're facing. And then try to talk that through. If it turns out to be a government problem, that's helpful for us because we can collect that information, try to advocate for them, or add it in with the other business groups, so that there's more united voice from the business associations to our state and federal officials.
Sure. I can't help but think, Peter, during our discussion, coming into my mind is there's a new opportunity here for a new major at some of the higher learning institutions of pandemic planner, to have somebody certified and then, create a new industry. Hopefully we don't need it again in the near future, but to rebound from this situation.
There will be a lot of new businesses that come out of this.
Yeah.
You just can't predict what they're going to be.
Right.
But people are creative. You will see a lot of new businesses come out of this. Some of them will turn out to be very big. You'll see very different business models. You'll see interesting things here. I think one of the industries that's going to see a resurgence is manufacturing. I think this whole pandemic was an incredible national education about supply chains. People understand that, or are understanding that what you buy in a store has many different parts coming from lots of different places. And it's not enough to talk to your store or the store's distributor. The manufacturer can't get a part from some other section of the world.
Yeah.
And that slows down everything. So this whole education on supply chain, I think, is going to build more support and momentum for greater manufacturing in the United States, so that we are prepared for the next international disaster that may come. There'll be some opportunities in Massachusetts. I think everyone thinks that there's no manufacturing in Massachusetts, that we're beyond that stage. There's actually a lot of small manufacturing in this state. And I think that's an area where we're going to see business and job growth.
Yeah, just today, the governor's at the Simmons plant in Braintree, the plumbing supply manufacturer. So there's one example right there.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to leave with us today, Peter?
No, I appreciate the chance to join you. Appreciate the forum. Glad that the media has been so responsive and adjusting and changing their programming and putting out so much information for the public. It's confusing with all the information out there. So great that or all the questions that people have. Great that you and other media organizations have been trying to respond to that need.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. If folks have questions or would like to reach out to the Chamber, what's a good way for them to do that?
Best way, our website, southshorechamber.org, or they could call us 781-421-3900. Website is the easiest way. We're going to be I'm here most days, but we're working remotely for the most part as a staff. But the website has a lot on our programming, and people get some information there.
Great. Again, appreciate your time. Hopefully we can meet in person soon.
All right, Joe. Look forward to it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you to Peter Foreman, President of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce, for joining us today. Thank you to our crew working remotely from home. Thank you for watching. And a reminder to please participate in the Quincy COVID Memories Project. QATV, the Thomas Crane Library, Quincy 400, and the city are all teaming up to collect videos, photos, audio clips, stories, essays, artwork, or any other reflections of how the pandemic is impacting your life. All the submissions will be archived by the Thomas Crane Public Library. You have the option of making your entry public. Go to quincyculturalmemory.com or mail your entry to the Thomas Crane Library, attention Local History at 40 Washington Street, Quincy, 02169. And an invitation, please visit our newly redesigned website at qatv.org. You'll find all of your favorite programs, plus news and information. Now we are live streaming. From all of us here at Quincy Access Television, I'm Joe Catalano. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, and please stay safe.